Right, let's dive into this explainer on Eric Ries's The Lean Startup. You know the story, right? A couple of brilliant college kids in a dorm room, fueled by youthful enthusiasm, sketch out this absolutely perfect business plan, and boom, they seamlessly execute it for overnight fame and fortune. It's a great story, but it's a total Hollywood myth. Today, we're going to completely dismantle that romanticized idea of entrepreneurship and replace it with something much more reliable: rigorous science.
So I want you to start by asking yourself this really simple but honestly kind of frustrating question. If that traditional narrative is actually true, that success just comes from having a brilliant idea, doing some thorough market research, and writing a rock-solid strategy, then why on earth do so many promising startups fail so miserably? Because the reality is, the grim majority of new ventures just don't live up to their potential. Those old-school management methods, they're simply not up to the task of predicting the future in our fast-paced world.
What happens is founders constantly fall into one of two extreme traps. On one hand, you have traditional management. This is the siren song of rigid corporate tools, right? We're talking extensive planning, massive spreadsheets, months of forecasting. But when that inevitably fails to handle the crazy unpredictability of a new market, entrepreneurs tend to swing entirely the other side, the just-do-it school. They figure, hey, if management is the problem, then pure, unmanaged chaos must be the answer. Well, spoiler alert, neither of these actually works.
Actually, falling into that trap of overplanning often leads to this tragic irony that Ries calls achieving failure. Just imagine this for a second. You spend a whole year successfully, faithfully, and rigorously executing a highly detailed business plan. You're hitting every single milestone, you launch right on time, you are perfectly on budget. But it turns out to be utterly flawed because you built something that absolutely nobody actually wants. So congratulations, you've successfully executed a plan that leads literally nowhere.
To stop achieving failure, we desperately need a new framework. Let's look at Section 1, The Entrepreneur, a modern redefinition. To really get this, we have to broaden our understanding of who an entrepreneur actually is in today's economy.
You see, a startup isn't defined by the size of the company, what industry it's in, or a couple of founders eating ramen noodles in a garage. It's actually defined by operating under extreme uncertainty. That's the key. Anyone who's creating a new product or business under those chaotic conditions is an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter if you work in a nonprofit, a venture-backed tech company, or even a massive government agency.
To really prove this, let me tell you the story of Intuit's SnapTax. Now, Intuit is a massive Fortune 1000 finance corporation. Yet a tiny team of just 5 people acting as internal entrepreneurs inside this giant 7,000-person company managed to build a revolutionary mobile tax app. They operated under extreme uncertainty, they tested their ideas rapidly, and they launched SnapTax. The result? It hit 350,000 downloads in just its first 3 weeks. No way, right? They were literally acting as entrepreneurs inside a massive enterprise.
Think about what Scott Cook, the founder of Intuit, is saying here. True innovation absolutely requires a system of rapid, continuous testing. Because think about it, if a company only allows one big product launch a year, employees are basically forced to act like politicians, right? They're lobbying in boardrooms just trying to get their single idea to win. But when you allow hundreds of rapid tests, the customers vote with their actions. You stop the endless boardroom debating, and you finally start experimenting. And this shift in mindset really matters because of the sheer scale of our productive power. Just look at the immense growth in U.S. manufacturing capacity over those decades. As a society, we have unbelievable productive muscle. We can build almost anything we can dream up. But, and this is a big but, building things that nobody actually wants is a colossal waste of our civilization's most precious resources: human time, passion, and skill. We absolutely have to have a way to ensure we're building the right things. Which brings us to our next major hurdle. Section 2, Illusion of Progress, Measuring Success. So how exactly do we measure success and progress when we're operating in total absolute uncertainty? The answer is something called validated learning. Often when a startup fails to deliver results, founders will fall back on that classic excuse, well, at least we learned a lot. But learning shouldn't just be a handy excuse for failing. Validated learning is a rigorous, scientific yardstick for progress. It's hard, empirical data collected from real customers. It's the total opposite of what we call success theater. Those flashy PR stunts and vanity metrics that make a company look amazing on paper, but completely hide the fact that they aren't actually growing a sustainable business. But getting that empirical data means facing what Ries calls the audacity of zero. Think about it. When you have zero revenue and zero customers, your imagination is totally boundless.
You can project these massive, beautiful hockey stick growth charts. But actually launching a product and getting small, real numbers, like say $300 a month in revenue, that's terrifying. It pours absolute cold water on the dream. Yet, pushing past that fear of small numbers is absolutely essential if you want to kick off the validated learning process.
Let's see how this looks in practice. Part 3, the IMView Pivot, a case study. We're going to look at a personal failure from the author himself, Eric Ries, and how his team really struggled to build a 3D avatar company called IMView.
So, IMView started with what they genuinely thought was a brilliant strategy. They were going to build an instant messaging add-on that would just piggyback off existing massive networks like AOL. They embarked on this grueling 180-day sprint to launch. They spent endless hours arguing over which bugs to fix, which features to cram in, the whole shebang. Finally, with teeth clenched, they launched the product. And the result? Literally 0 people wanted to use it. Not one. Nobody would even download it. Desperate, they started bringing real customers, mostly teenagers, into their office for usability tests. They'd ask them to download the add-on and then immediately invite their friends from their existing buddy lists to join. Well, the teenagers completely rejected this so-called brilliant viral strategy. As one teenage customer painfully, but honestly kind of humorously pointed out, why on earth would they risk their social standing by inviting friends to a product before they even knew if it was actually cool? It was a total deal breaker.
Through these incredibly painful in-person experiments, this massive realization finally dawned on the team. Their core strategic assumption was entirely 100% wrong. Customers didn't want an add-on to talk to their existing friends. What they actually wanted was a standalone network to make new friends online, safely using 3D avatars. So all of that software code Ries had meticulously written over 6 months to make the product work with a dozen different IM networks? Yeah, it was a complete and utter waste of time.
So think of building a startup more like driving a car rather than launching a rocket. Your destination is your vision. It sits firmly right there at the base of the pyramid, and it rarely ever changes. You're fully committed to seeing the startup through to that specific destination. But the route, how you actually get there, that has to remain totally flexible.
So how exactly do we steer this car? Well, the product up at the top is constantly changing through tuning and optimization. But sometimes, just like with IMView, you realize your core assumptions are totally flawed. And that means the strategy sitting in the middle requires a really sharp turn. This is what we call a pivot. You're changing course, adjusting both the strategy and the product, all while keeping one foot anchored firmly to the ground in that original vision.
All right, let's wrap this up with Section 4. Science over alchemy, testing products. Applying the scientific method fundamentally changes how we test early ideas out there in the real world.
Consider Zappos, right? The massive billion-dollar online shoe retailer. Well, founder Nick Swinmurn didn't start off by securing massive distribution partners or building these giant, expensive warehouses. No way. He just wanted to test a very simple hypothesis. Will people actually buy shoes online? So he literally just walked into local shoe stores, took photos of their inventory, and posted those pictures online. If a customer bought a pair, he'd go back, buy the shoes from the store at full retail price, and ship them out himself. He scientifically validated the demand before spending an absolute fortune scaling up.
Or take the village laundry service in India. Instead of building all these expensive storefronts right out of the gate, they spent less than $8,000 on a micro-experiment. They mounted a standard consumer washing machine onto the back of a pickup truck and just parked it on a street corner in Bangalore. Now, this simple experiment proved people were willing to hand over their laundry and pay for the service, for sure. But it also uncovered a really critical insight. Customers were terrified the truck would just drive off with their clothes. They learned about those customer trust issues instantly, which let them completely redesign their kiosks before they expanded.
Meanwhile, over at Kodak Gallery, Vice President Mark Cook instituted 4 really crucial development questions before his engineers were allowed to write a single line of code. You see, usually traditional management skips straight to step 4. Hey, can we build a solution? And then they just go ahead and build it. But Cook forced his team to slow down. They had to first prove that consumers actually recognized they had a problem in the first place, and more importantly, that they'd be willing to pay Kodak to solve it.
So the core thesis of the lean startup really boils down to this. Please, don't just ship a product and see what happens. Sure, that guarantees you'll succeed at seeing what happens, but it definitely doesn't guarantee you'll learn anything valuable. True innovation requires taking those grand, ambitious visions and breaking them down into testable components. You've got to treat every new feature, every marketing campaign, and every single business model like a rigorous scientific experiment.
to discover what creates actual measurable value.
So as we close out this explainer, I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative thought. Think about the projects you're working on today, right now. What untested leaps of faith are secretly hiding in your grand plans? What assumptions are you building your business on today that you haven't actually scientifically validated yet? Find them, design an experiment, and start learning. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you next time.